AugMentors. I'm Julie.
And I'm Jimmy.
We are here to augment your leadership through mentoring. We have a special 2-part series coming up on how mentoring can be an anchor during job transitions. These mini pods will focus on practical tips and tricks to leverage your network and ask for help. Today is part 1 with Winston Hsu, a recent graduate of the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy.
I feel really lucky to be able to introduce Winston. I first met Winston as a student, and from there we have worked together, shared a lot of late nights across time zones, trying to improve the experience and education for others. And over that time, I've seen Winston become more eloquent and really start finding strength in sharing his layers and vulnerabilities. And these are vulnerabilities that we all experience from time to time. So if you are somebody that is looking for a job now, or you're somebody who is thinking about looking for a job in the future, turn around, look in the mirror. It's probably you, because we all are going to have a new job in the future at some point. Listen to this episode. This episode
is that a hint?
It's a hint. Oh God, it's a brick wall behind me. But yeah, there's something happening. Julie will fire me at some point, and I won't be able to be a co-host of AugMentors anymore. But on this episode and in the series, so listen to the next episode with John Rubin. In this episode, we will be touching on themes of acceptance of yourself and acceptance of the change, like the transformation that you will achieve as you explore new connections and new careers. So here's Winston.
Into it. I think with the job search and what I gather from all my experience with my friends and talking to you, mentors and all that, it's that it's all a numbers game, and it's just rapid fire of like as many jobs you can shoot out as you can, right? But part of that process is your ego and your pride is going to take a huge hit. And I think that's definitely felt during my transition time. I don't think I went through a lot of different experiences in my life coming in, graduating out of high school in Shanghai, and then dropping myself in Paris, France for a year, doing school there. And then that year, the bombing attacks happened with ISIS, and it was like a huge situation. People just went home. After that, I went to California Community College, and then landed my spot in Davis. Fell in love with agriculture.
UC Davis?
Yeah, UC Davis, near Sacramento. So, and through there, I also met some mentors on the way. But it wasn't really a period. I did have that period before I went to Tufts where it's like I could look for a job, and I did get an interview and all that. But it was like kind of a bad feeling, in some sense. You think you're special, but you're not getting that attention when you throw your application out. You're not getting replies. It's just not happening, and you're like, I gotta look away from that side and just keep pushing forward. So I think we're having mentors, even like you, Jimmy, like on the side, and kind of just validating some of the stuff and seeing that you're not alone was a huge part of supporting myself through like the job search. And I'm also going to venture deep into that territory right now. Just clearing everything out of Boston. This is the time where it's okay, got to fire a crap ton of resumes out there and look at as many jobs as I can. Yeah, it is a little worry. I had, previous alumni tell me about they're securing a job like maybe a year later. I think for me, how I live my life is really always just to really be in the present. I think I spend my time at a young age just worrying way too much about the future. The whole Asian parents like do law, be a doctor, or be a coder. That was like the experience in high school in Shanghai, and it seems like everything after that, just detaching yourself from that mindset. If you focus on the present, everything would just fall in line naturally. So yeah, getting into the thick of it. But yeah, I think
Winston, I really appreciate you sharing. And tell me a little, you mentioned part of this process now that you are graduating with a graduate degree, and it takes, you said, firing off a whole bunch of resumes. What are some of the assumptions that you have that like the quantity is part of this kind of process?
I think the major assumption is always that when you are in this job search, uh, to even be excited about a certain position, to get to a point where I should be very vested in and being very engaged, is when you kind of hear back with getting just an interview. I think everything before that is a very robotic process
Hmm.
that the resume is refined, you talk to your mentors, you clean everything up. There's just no guarantee. And when you hear something back from them, application, there's just zero communication afterwards.
We say here on AugMentors that all great leaders have great mentors.
Yeah.
So within this process, as you are, going around and trying to figure out your next step, what what does it feel like when reaching out to a mentor or somebody who could assist you in the job search? Like how is that different from maybe even 2 months ago or a year ago when you were reaching out to people?
Um, I think coming out of my program and given my bunch of pivots in my life, originally in Davis, I was going to do history and maybe do law afterwards. It is just
I didn't
really,
know that.
yeah, yeah. It was like I was really good at doing historical analysis, critical analysis, and the only end path of getting paid with a history degree at that time, what I was thinking was, oh, you just go into law. Um, and I did, yeah, like
I
trying
mean,
to take a,
once you know enough about, King Arthur or the Qing Dynasty, then yeah, law, of course.
oh yeah, yeah. And it was just I mean, Boston's not that different in California, but the living cost is not that low. So it was like, yeah, what's to be really sustainable in that field? And it was a very interesting field. I really enjoyed my time studying history. I focused mainly on Republican Chinese history. Came right out World War II. But yeah, I think with mentors, going back to the topic, is just some kind of validation and some sense of guidance. It's not that you want your mentor to push you to pivot, but just kind of nudge you into a right direction to look at. Because, like I said, back to the perspective, history and law and all that, it was kind of like I'm in a position that I have a lot of expertise in a lot of different fields, but to really shine in one central field, like doing research in one specific area for a lot of people for like 1, 2 to 3 years in their entire undergraduate career, it didn't felt that strong for me. So it was like, oh, there's a lot of avenues to explore, but there's not that one central highway that I know to hop on.
I'm curious, Winston, we asked this question quite a bit to a guest on the show about what's something that people approaching a mentor should or should not do, like best practices. But I'd really like your opinion on what are best practices for someone in a mentoring relationship to do to help somebody in their job search, and also maybe what are some do not do's, such as don't just tell somebody to walk in cold to offices and throw paper airplane resumes at people.
I think it's really building that dialogue and trust at the start. So, having a casual conversation with someone you're being mentored or mentoring, was a really big prerequisite to really be comfortable in doing stuff that's risky. That, like you said, dropping a resume off in person, it was always, this person is deep down cares for you and inherently wants you to be better. When you have that sense of safety, everything will just kind of flow naturally. And I would say this is a time to listen, but not too much back and forth of looking around. Asking questions with your mentor and getting a reply is big. And I don't want to say you want to just completely listen to one person out of everyone, but still, I think I find myself often in like a high or low of, oh, you could feel a little insecure at times when you're just not having a good time with the job search. When your mentor really comes in and just help you out and just support you.
Is
I
there something particularly that like, give me an example of the last conversation you had or a recent one where it was like, oh, this was actually really helpful.
One thing like talking to my mentors during graduation, after graduation, is just realizing your self value. I remember some of my mentors kind of highlighting areas of strength that I feel, I don't know, like for me as a person, I always kind of conflict myself with I don't want to be a show off to myself. You know, being that kind of uncomfortable is like I don't want too much
Mm.
attention, but you're not giving yourself enough credit. And having discussions with my mentor, just throwing out like, oh, these are your strengths. Like you are actually you're actually doing really well leading this area and all that. That goes a long way for me.
Well, Winston, it sounds
Yeah.
like what you're saying is sort of that actually like an honest reflection back to
Yeah.
you of because it's very hard as yourself. You either see yourself as, like you said, either like really great with no faults, and all of a sudden you go to apply for all these jobs and you don't hear back and you're not
Hmm.
chosen. Or you think of yourself as somebody who, is a loser and is never going to make anything of yourself. So I think the idea of having a mentor that can really reflect back to you, like these are areas where you're strong, these are areas where there's room for improvement, and also have patience, right? Because it might be that you're just not the right fit for this job, even though it feels like, oh my gosh, I desperately want it. Or like, that's actually not a great job for you. Like,
Hmm.
you may really want that, but it's probably not going to happen because of your skills or what have you. So it sounds like really that kind of honest evaluation of where you're at is what's most helpful,
Yeah.
which
And
we all can use, by the way. Like, it's really helpful for everybody because even as a professional, you're kind, especially as an entrepreneur, you don't have, review, or you don't have a sense of where you are versus others in the
Mhm.
organization. So sometimes it is hard to get a sense of what really is your natural strength and what is just maybe not right for you.
Yeah, and part of me going back was just living in the present, not worrying about the future and the past. I just move like currently right now. What do I have to work with? But also going back, like I would say myself, I do was kind of raised and as a selfless person. I care more about others than myself. So in my case, that sense of validation was really helpful. I don't think I would feel too comfortable just like spending time just like praising myself. You know, like this is Winston. I do this so well, and I'd be like kind of cringe in my heart and like that's kind of weird. Why would I say that? Uh, but the mentorship, that's the huge assistant part of putting me in a direction. And nowadays, I actually do keep a big list of things that I'm good at. You know, stuff that my mentors say. I would just
Mm.
write it down and be like, "Oh yeah, like you did this pretty well," and I just open that list when I feel a little down and just be like, "Hey, it's really not that bad." I don't wanna. They call it cognitive distortions, right? Like always like, focusing on a negative or like expecting the worst. I think a lot of people have these distortions as well, and to get that snap out of it is just great.
I love that, having the list. That's wonderful. And like
Yeah.
being okay with keeping it by you, that you write down these things that you hear about yourself.
Hmm.
I came back to this office. I hadn't been here in a year, and I came back and I had a post-it on my computer that said, "Julie is dangerous in any conversation." And I realized it was something that Jimmy said last year, and I wrote it down. So I took it as a huge compliment to be dangerous in any conversation. So yeah, it is nice when you hear those things. Jot it down, put it somewhere
It's just
so you don't forget.
yeah, it's a feel good, and not like don't look at it every day, but like when you're down, you open it, you're like, oh, it's great.
That's
Not
a really powerful idea, though, Winston, that mentors can provide a cognitive distortion gift that when you are down and you want to distort your own mind into something more positive and beneficial, you can go back to this list that your mentors have given you.
and I first found out about cognitive distortions like through actually a therapist, just hearing like, oh, humans actually do this all the time, and there's a whole list of things that like the what if statements, like end all be all statements, all that. It's in one list, and you're reading going through like, damn, like that's not fair. It's just not fair to yourself, and it did change my way of thinking. So I think it's something everyone should take a look at. Yeah.
It sounds like what I do every time I get on the basketball court, and I'm like, I might be able to touch the rim still. Let me go jump and see if I can get up there. What do you think, Winston? If one of your mentors who knew you back from UC Davis or back in France or in Shanghai, if one of your mentors was going to describe you now, how would they describe you?
Yeah, I'll say I, well, Winston's a very engaging person that brings a lot of positive energy and just really wants to understand and care about other people and what they do and all that. And I think, and I want to say, yeah, part of me and how I feel good about like things like networking, engaging and talking to people is just the genuine interest in other people. You know, I love to cook, right? Or I love, me personally, I love to travel and all that. And I just want to hear other people's perspective about like what's their local, you know, routine, what's their local restaurant. Just having that kind of conversation opener has really worked well for me. And just putting, it goes back to the selfless nature, I think, that I kind of grew up with and just being interested in others. Yeah, I think that worked really well for me. I feel very good about talking to people, and that's how I just keep conversations going.
It's amazing that that was a wonderful description. You gave me some goosebumps. I wholeheartedly agree. But it's really interesting how your self-description almost doesn't match up at all with when you talked about the robotic process of finding a job and that everything before the interview is robotic.
And yeah, that's why like you know, having a mentor like you talking about like being in person, throwing a resume in person. Yes, like we are very detached from the human nature of like a job search because you're not going to meet anyone in person until an interview. You can have an informal interview before, which I think will be tremendous for my situation. Well, not situation, but my process of finding a job. But being in person there, getting to know people and being very human in some sense, I would like to do that and show my strong suit. So yeah, and I think it goes to job search too. Like I don't think having a remote job it'll be very convenient, just travel everywhere and do all that. But to progress and show my strong suit, I really have to be in person and just having that connection.
That's a great thing to know about yourself and to have that
Yeah.
self-awareness because you do have to narrow down, right, the broader search. So to know that that's really where your strength is being
Hmm.
able to be in person and be able to make that deeper connection, which I think is
Hmm.
one of the tougher things. We were just talking a bit about meeting at events, going to events and going to networking events and what that first line is, what your opening line is in those networking events. Do you have any great
Yeah.
opening lines that you've used at networking events?
It's always, oh, so where are you from? And then you digress. Oh, that city. And then I connect to, oh, I kind of been that area nearby. And it's like, I start throwing my knowledge about cooking and food or some of my passion. And then you just like, I never talk. You never want to, for me, never want to start off things with work. It's just always about like their life and them as a person, as a human. And then I just want to know what their like experiences, because part of joy in my life, I think, is just taking people to places that are in my childhood or my experience and seeing their
Mm.
reaction and like tasting this food that I always enjoy as a child, just seeing their expression, whether it be good or bad. But that brings a lot of joy in my life, and then having that mindset helps.
I love it. What is one thing that mentors right now do that
Mhm.
is not productive for you? That you're like, oh God, this is going to happen again.
Currently, my exposure to mentors has never had a lot of friction. I do want to say for in this case, like this is not doesn't really apply to a lot of people, but some of the biggest mentor in your life could be your parents, right?
Hmm.
And every time, I don't know, for me at least, like when your parents start throwing you advice, it's always like a process of you kind of cringe about it. You're like, don't tell me what to do. I know myself better than you. But then you kind of fall back and be like, oh shit, like use your parents, they know the best. And then I kind of crumble and be like, yeah, actually, you know what? This makes a lot of sense as an advice, but I wouldn't really like show it back to them sometimes. So you're like,
Totally.
you're like secretly agree and start telling your friends like about this opinion or some kind of advice you got from your parents.
This
But
anonymous
they,
opinion. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And you're like, yeah, but your parents are not going to hear that you actually enjoyed what they said back then.
They know.
Uh, yeah, they know. It's like, it kind of really overrides a lot.
That's so funny. It's so true. And the fun fact is that Winston and my daughters went to the same school in Shanghai, which is
Yeah.
beyond bonkers. Talk about like the weirdest connection, although they were quite little when you were there. It's so funny. But yeah, it's funny as a parent and as a daughter of a parent who has actually some really, really good advice. It is funny when you're kind of in that somewhere in between where
Well,
you're
did you
like,
just say you have really good advice or you got really good advice, Julie?
I've
Or
got
both?
really good advice. I've got really good advice. Yeah, yeah, from both my parents for sure. Amazing
Yeah.
advice. But you're right. Sometimes you're just like, you don't want them to be right. But then when you are the parent and you know that your kid's not giving you credit, but they listened, it's like that's all you need. You just need to know that they at least heard somewhere
Yeah.
deep inside something that you said.
Yeah, you're in that shoe before, and you like deep down, whatever you say will actually go through, as long as they just put up that show in the start, right? I do want to say though, like having mentors, another big thing that was really big plus that came out of my mind was just taking, helping you jump or take that risk. Because I had that couple pivots in my life where I had an opportunity to work in Wisconsin in a ginseng farm, right? And to me, that was like such a deep hole for me because really like being I would not expect myself to go to rural Wisconsin, a place that, is so tiny compared to Boston, and just to work it out. But that became a really rewarding experience for me. I learned so much on the job. There's I had I there's inter-office conflict, you had to deal with a boss, like it all worked out in the end. I think one of the most rewarding part of that was um, not gotten to like know stuff that a lot of people can't experience. Like my boss telling me, grab the truck, go hook up a commercial sprayer on the truck and bring it over. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the moment to prove myself. I did it before, but he just throwing me in the dark. And then I, drove like a big Ram 3500 diesel truck, hauled the sprayer over, and then it just and I was like, wow, damn, like, did I really do that? I can't believe I'm in this position, and like, and I didn't know what everything that came afterwards of telling that story and having even a conversation opener, or just telling, yeah, being invited to tell that story in front of a lot of people in this in the Food and Innovation Summit in Tufts. It was then not expected. So high risk, high reward, and having your mentor pushing you to actually take that risk is huge. It's really, really big for me.
I love it. So that's something that mentors can do that's really helpful
Yeah.
for people in this time. What's one thing that you might give as advice to your peers and maybe to yourself, actually, if you're looking into the accountability mirror? And maybe it's just, how you treat yourself, whatever your self-talk is. Maybe it's even just, do this like one thing a day. I don't know, but like, is there one piece of advice you think most of your peers are missing right now?
I wouldn't even say they're missing, but I think going back to that risk, being scared of doing something is one process of it, but at least attempting it can either complete that circle or push you forward in a lot of ways because it's always like you're just scared of that first step. But if you don't take it, it's like the generic, if you don't shoot your shot, what is it? You don't make 100% of the shots you don't make or something like that.
Yeah.
It is that. And I found out, like going back, it's high risk, high reward. And you learn so much on mistakes. Like being afraid is one thing. You're just going to be afraid and not act on it. That's it. That's the end of the story. But then doing it and then maybe like a big screw up or like now and then, nothing is guaranteed, right? That is all in itself also a great experience. And I learned a lot from.
So within the nothing is guaranteed, what do you have a quote from a mentor or maybe even a parent, a mentor that stays in your head? We like to call this segment "Let's Get Phrasy." So however you want to do it.
This is more of like my days as a football player. And I don't even know if it really applies to this current situation. It was like something like the pain is temporary, but pride is forever, or something like that.
I thought you were about to do an Al Pacino line about inches. Uh,
No, it was always like, yeah, just eat the dirt for a little bit. Maybe you won't eat the dirt, but you will if you, it's great. You at least did it. You just took that step. That wasn't a quote from specific anybody. I think it was just like, oh yeah, work hard and you're in the gym and then you'll do well in football. Back then.
I love it. I think the quote I wrote down was Winston Hsu, "Eat the dirt." At the very least, you ate the dirt. And we'll get
Yeah,
better.
correct.
So, Julie, do you have one more question before I get to some rapid fire?
No, I
Oh,
love that. To me that was the this too shall pass, right? It's like at this phase in your life, Winston, like the next chapter is coming. You just don't know
mhm,
when, and you don't know
mhm.
what, and you don't know how, and like you have to just keep believing that whatever is next is going to come and just keep showing
Yeah.
up for it. And I think that's true again, like going back to the phase in your life, but depending upon where you are in your journey, whether that's through your job, where you already are as an entrepreneur, you're always just, imagining kind of where you want to go and then
Mhm.
finding the people to help you get there. So I think it's really encouraging to hear your perspective, your positive attitude, and the approach that you're taking to this getting from where you are now into that next chapter. And I think some people really lose sight of almost like the magic that happens in that
Mhm.
part because they're so focused on getting to the next part that they kind of
Yeah.
miss like this little bit of magic where like you don't know exactly what's going to happen and you're having all these conversations, reaching out to all these people, and that that time is special even though it's really hard. And when you
Mhm.
get to the next phase, you look back and you see why all of it happened, and it all totally makes sense.
Yes, and everything I say when I approach things, yeah, just like calculate what the worst case scenario is and be reasonable. Like, oh, the worst case scenario is like they lash out on you, but they're like, oh, everyone's human. Why would they do that? That's not reasonable. Just walk in, like whatever. I already know what to expect as a worst case, so
I love it. The worst case scenario when you eat the dirt is you get a little iron. You might not have that in your diet already.
Good like soil microbiome. I know we've all talked a lot about that.
yeah, yeah.
Some good bacteria.
You can literally increase your gut flora.
Don't don't till that land. Keep it set.
All right, Winston, something we do with every guest is we have a rapid fire word association. So I'm going to
Okay.
say a word and, verbal Rorschach test, what comes back. When I
Okay.
say mentor, what do you say?
I'm just thinking teacher.
How about when I say mentee?
Is it gratification?
How about the word sponsor?
To nurture, I think.
And lastly, when I say coach, what would you say?
Game strategy, I think.
Strategy.
Yeah.
One more question for you. If I
Okay.
said, Winston, we're going to fast forward 27 years, it's going to be 2050.
Uh-huh.
I know you're into a technology. How do you think mentoring will occur? What will it look like? How would you define mentoring in 2050? Maybe it's a different word.
I want to just talk about that a little bit. Is in mentors to me only came out of my time through either family or school. And I know as my personal background, I have work, but it hasn't gone to a point where mentors are developed out of your coworkers. Um, so like that, and then maybe your bosses. But once that kind of, let's say if things are all going virtual in some sense, and you can't say that like there's no human connection at all. I mean, we're still talking, we're having a great conversation here.
I thought so too.
Yeah, like what is really the lost here? Like I know that in-person human connection is great because we could be, I don't know, eating, drinking, get a better sense of what the other person's body language. Yeah, body language. I think that helps you gauge better and helps you know what to say and know what to ask and know how to go forward in a conversation. But it's not that we're not taking away that visual aspect of things. People are definitely going to get more comfortable on this virtual landscape, and I think as niche as the meta universe and the VR world, if that really takes off, then yeah, that's taking the next step of virtual work and virtual human connections. And we're just gonna have to see. Like, it would be a big split of people in the home VR, sitting in the room just doing that, and there would be like people who like hate that, who want to go out into nature and like meet people face person.
But if it gets good
So
enough, you'll be able to tell the difference.
I think the split is there, yeah. But everything is so globalized now. I mean, Julie, because you lived in Shanghai at a time where expats were just flooding in out of nowhere everywhere. Yeah, people are like totally fine talking to. I always call my friends overseas. I always keep in contact with people in other countries. It's hard to even just have like a set city to have all your friend groups in. I don't think we should
Yeah.
never have that expectations. Like, yeah, like we're gonna always have that social circle in one area. That's what I lived with.
Probably
Like,
not.
yeah, coming out of Shanghai and this is with all international students. You just gotta put everything aside in that country and just start something new, like flat out. And it's a little scary, but it worked out very well every single time. Just starting a conversation in the classroom or at work. Yeah,
Winston, that
you
was
know, there's
great.
yeah.
Yeah. What do you got?
No, like people are also in the same position. They want to have that circle too, and just building that trust is key. Just being genuine and being interested in others, I think helps a lot with that. Here to listen, not here to like show off. I think that's always what I'm thinking.
Julie, that was fun. It's really cool to be able to talk to people on the pod who you become close to over time. And it is going to be no change when we tee up John Rubin. This two-part series is like people Jimmy talked to a lot. which is kind of fun.
Well, and people that you mentor. Whether or not John will admit that, but I would definitely say Winston.
And people that you've gotten to know as well because of So this is a really special 2-part series, and we are going to now have John Rubin coming up for our next episode. If you want to hear Winston's show notes and you don't want to listen to John Rubin, that's fine. Just go into next episode and you will be able to see what time we do our outro, and you will hear what Julie and I learned from Winston and how all augmenters can better grow to their potential through Winston's wisdom. Next episode is John Rubin, my dear friend, my ex-neighbor and ex-roommate. Maybe he'll let me move in nearby again. Who knows? We'll see. Regardless, John is going to be sharing about what it feels like to have a career transition a bit more in the middle of your working time. It's a great conversation. John has taught me so much over the years, and I think we all will learn quite a bit as well. Tee up next episode. Download, like,
here we go.
Self-promote, Julie. Do it. AugMentors out.
AugMentors out. Wow, you've made it this far, and we thank you. Hopefully you enjoyed our episode and discovered new ways to bring more authentic connection into your mentoring relationships. Want to tell them more, Jimmy?
Be an augmenter with us. Visit our website for the best interactive mentoring content at augmentors.us. Share our podcast with someone you care about. Like and subscribe. And yes, really, you following our show and writing a review, it's a big deal. Your actions provide us with the resources to continue our undefeated, unencumbered, prize-winning productions. We welcome questions and suggestions via email hi@augmentors.us or on social with our handle @augmentorshq. We are most active and available on LinkedIn and YouTube. Shout out and earnest thank you to our intrepid producer, Erlen Cato. We appreciate you. AugMentors out.
See ya.